aim here today is to talk about ensuring success and avoiding adverse events in left atrial appendage occlusions, and this is my conflict of interest. Okay, so complications. The best therapy for avoiding complication, is its avoidance. If you have to treat a complication, the best thing to do is actually to avoid it. The second best therapy for a complication is its prediction and the ability to intervene before it actually occurs. The simpler the procedure, the less likely we are to see complications. So the mantra needs to be, keep it simple. So let's start with our first case, which I've called it, Tips for a Happy Life. So the first thing, I've gone the wrong way, sorry about that. Adequate preparation. You need to know what you're facing, so you need to do some sort of anatomical investigation, whether it be a transesophageal echo, whether it be CT scanning, to allow you to do some sort of initial sizing and understand the septal anatomy. Here we're going to start off with some TE scanning, and here you can see, starting off in the 0 view, this is going to be the long axis, and we can see there's lots of smoke. Get some sort of concept as to what's going on. We're going across to about the 45 view. We can now start to see a neck and see some more body. Distinction between the axes of those, going across more to the 70, 75 view, same sort of thing, lots of swirling. Then we're going to go across to the 90 view. Once again, do a complete scan so that you can understand, and finally come across to the 120 view, which is not useful particularly for measuring or for deploying, but nonetheless it allows you to see some of the distal lobes and where they are and how complex the appendage is. Then you're going to come back and you'll do your measures, and here you can see a relatively straightforward measure where we would measure our ostium and where we would measure our landing zone 1 centimetre in. The next thing that you want to do is, in this scanning echo, is you want to have a look at the septum, get some sort of concept as to what's going on in that septum, what the septal anatomy looks like, whether there are any things that look like tenting before you put anything there. You can get a good look if there's going to be confusion here, clearly, because there's a pacing electrode running across. Somebody might think that's a wire or that's a needle going across. You can see our needle sitting up here. You can get a look also at the thickness of the septum secundum as opposed to the septum primum, some sort of understanding as to how aneurysmatic it is and how much room there's going to be to puncture on it. So when you perform your septal puncture, as I'm not going to go into this too much, but make sure you do it under vision. That's for 2 reasons. Number 1 is it improves your safety, and number 2, it allows you to direct yourself. Probably what you're looking for is an inferior-posterior position. The benefits of X-plane is clearly marked. You can have a combination of both a bicaval view to allow you the inferior-posterior view, as well as a short axis at the base to allow you to have an anterior-posterior understanding. So what you're going to look for specifically is going to be an inferior and a posterior position. You can do it one after the other. You can do it excuse me, simultaneously. When you go to puncture, and here we've clearly, this is aorta here, we've got a pigtail sitting on the aorta, we've got our pacing wire here, we've got the needle sitting on the inferior rim, on the posterior rim of the fossa, and what you can see is that our echo guy here is making, it's Dr. Adi Butanaro, who's also here, has made a major effort to try and show us the summit, so we can always see the summit so we know exactly when we're going through and at which angle we're going through at any time that we do that. We can watch it go through, we can keep an eye on the end of the needle so we know we've not traversed too far and that we can happily exchange out. It makes for a very simple and safe procedure. If you perform your septal passage under vision, then you will be able to determine up front whether there's going to be problems, whether by pushing your needle you don't go through, if you slip upwards, if you slip downwards, if by turning, whether it turns anteriorly as you advance it, whether the septum is so aneurysmatic that you reach out to the free wall. All of this is seen very clearly by echo. So you have simple solutions. The safe sept that Professor Butz mentioned, you can put some electrocautery on it and burn your way through. You can use radiofrequency with the Baylis system. All of those allow you to avoid that potential problem. If you've passed and then you're coming across with your dilator and it's not going through and your delivery system is having trouble, which also may occur whether it's a patched septum or it's a very thick septum, then you may want to try just using the dilator. You can take the Torre dilator from the valvuloplasty system. That's also very useful for dilating the septum before you go across with your 13 French or 12 or 14 French, whichever the sheath you're going to use. And finally, on one occasion, what I've used is actually put a balloon across inside the sheath and used it as a dilator. I dilated it up and then slipped across with the balloon. That's a useful solution. Okay, then you can continue to use your echo. Use what you have and allow the echo to advance you up to the appendage. Now here we can see we've made, my personal preference is to use, it's usually a Mullins 8 French sheath, and then I've got a 5 French multi-purpose catheter with side holes. And this is an injection I do just to sort of get a clue as what's going on and what the base anatomy is. I then use not the prescribed views. I use 4 specific views and then choose how to work. Because if you haven't seen them all, then you don't know what you've got. So this is, and I use somewhere between 4 and 6 cc's of contrast per injection. So this is a straight RAO view, and now we can start to see where the direction of the appendage. This is an RAO cranial view, and you can see there's a long neck. You can see it's a very lateral looking appendage. It's not superior at all. And in this case, this is where we would take our measures, and we can see this is quite a happy position to go and where we would like to go. And subsequently, we do an RAO caudal view, which allows us to see the distal anatomy and see where the different lobes are poking. So then we can use the echo once again to allow us to see the angle of our catheter across the front of the appendage so that we can know we can sit not on the wall. At this point, we're going to go and change across to a sheath. Now, just a tip. Some of the issues that people are having is with the groin management. And so therefore, the 45-45 curved sheath can be very tough. And so therefore, what we'd like to suggest is perhaps predilate the groin. Most of the time, you're going to use at least a 12 French sheath. Put a short 12 French sheath in the groin, do your transeptal puncture through that, and subsequently, you'll be able to continue with your 13 French or 12, 14, whatever it is, without any problem. Some additional recommendations, if you're having extra trouble, is to make sure that you watch the advancements of your sheath in the groin under fluoroscopy. So therefore you can see where it's going, you don't get wire kinking. Because your concern is if you get stuck with the wire and you've got the distal wire sitting in the appendage, you're worried, or in the atrium at some point, you're worried about losing your atrial position, and this is something that we would like to recommend avoiding. The other possibility is to use a very stiff wire in order to prevent that problem. So here you can see once again the echo has directed me directly into the appendage. It's got perfect alignment because it was a very lateral looking appendage, and so therefore this is a 45-45 that's taking a very, very favourable look. Here's the first angio. We can see where the ostium is going to sit. We can see where we are, good imaging of the appendage. And then instead of telling you all of the things that I do, I'm going to tell you the 4 simple steps of deployment. Until now, we've told you about the 5 signs of stability. Well, I'm going to tell you about the 4 steps of deployment. Number 1 is unsheath to ball. Once your catheter's in position, you unsheath to ball. If you're going to do an amulet, it actually is a mushroom, but basically unsheath to ball. Number 2 is counterclock as needed by the neck takeoff. It's a very lateral takeoff. There's not much counterclock. If it's a superior takeoff, you need to do a lot of counterclock. At that point, you push out the rest of the lobe while your sheath is fixed. Fix the sheath, push the lobe, and the device will assume its position in the neck. Finally, number 4 is unsheath the disc with tension on the cable. So what do I mean? Let's have a look. Here we've actually got the ball already out, sitting in position. Because the axis of the neck and of the ostium is favourable, I don't need to counterclock. If it was going this direction, I would need here to counterclock. So I've got 1, I can skip point 2. Now we're going to go to point 3. At this point, I hold the sheath stiff and I push the device forward. It opens out sideways and assumes its position. It does not go forward. It only opens out sideways. Once I've achieved that, I can check my position. I see the apposition over here, how far I'm in. I can look at it by echo as well to see whether I'm sitting nicely, deep enough, where my circumflex is, whether the apposition at this side is adequate. And finally, I will put out the disc. Now, at this point, I maintain tension on the cable and unsheath. Look what happens to the waist, how it pulls out. This applies enough tension to maintain stability or to prove stability on the disc, on the lobe. So the disc is coming out, pulling everything back, and this puts me behind the ridge, so I know my disc is actually sitting outside of the appendage ostium, and I know that my lobe is adequately stable. Finally, a contrast injection. And then we need to go to the 5 signs of device stability. So now I'm going to once again change your lives, and I'm going to tell you that there are not 5 signs, there are 6 signs of stability. I've been threatening to come out with a sixth sign, but the 5 signs of stability, as everybody knows, is compression of the lobe, separation of the lobe and the disc. Number 3 is concavity of the disc. Number 4 is angulation of the lobe to the ostium, to the neck. And number 5 is 2/3 behind the circumflex of the lobe. Each one of you probably is saying these 5 signs in your sleep. The 6th sign, and it's present in a number of the cases that have that's not been present, a number of cases that are embolized where the other 5 signs have been present, is the lack of apposition of the lobe to the superior PV wall. So it's exactly the opposite of the 2/3 of the circumflex. If you look superiorly, where only an angle or a corner of the device is latched and it's not entirely opposed, that is a tendency to instability. So in this case, we can see our 5 signs, our circumflex, our angulation. We've actually got compression, we've got separation, we've got concavity, and we've actually got good apposition on this side. We work our way through all the different views, going to a 0. This is clearly well positioned. Put some color on it, I think, at this point, yeah, and let's just see it's got no leak and that we're looking fine. Once again, we'll move on and we'll see that in each one of the views, we've got what we would call an excellent position. Make sure there's no interference with the pulmonary vein and that it's clearly positioned. And here, we've reached the point of device release. Device release is with a bit of tension. You need to keep a little bit of tension on this disc as you're releasing it because it tends to push forward if you don't. So you may actually push the disc forward behind the ridge, so keep a little bit of tension when you let it go. Each one of these steps will prevent those complications that you want to avoid. Final contrast injection, and then you can have a look at it in a different view, incidence, in order to determine that you're adequately positioned. Then you do your final echo review once again, look at the mitral valve, look at the annulus, look at the distance, look at the pulmonary vein, get a good look at all your 5 signs again before you pull yourself out of the left atrium. And finally, don't forget, you can feel pleased with the result. So if you've done a good job, feel good about it. Okay, so let's move on to the second case. I'm going to call this a chicken wing sandwich, and this is actually in reverse. So the first aim is to do good preparation. So if you do good preparation, you've got a good echo, and in first view, this looks relatively simple and straightforward, but if we look at the X-plane, something very strange is going on. And if we do our first injection, we can see a couple of very interesting things. This is a chicken wing, but the chicken wing, instead of going this direction, is going this direction. This is an AP view. The other thing that's of interest that you should have a look at, I think you see now in the straight RAO view, is if you can see, oh, I think it's being cut off. Let me just see. No, sorry. Let me just see if I can get it for you here, because the edge of the image is cut off. The pulmonary vein ridge is here. So I'm not sure I know where the ostium is. The ostium is somewhere here, but the pulmonary vein ridge is over here. So this is all, appears to be quite a distance and not what we would normally call a pulmonary vein ridge. The second thing is I have no clue in a lateral view where the ostium is here. There is no ostium. There's no osteal definition. So I've got something that's going in the wrong direction, and it's not giving me any of the signs that I would normally like to see. So at this point, we progressed and did measures, and this is what was going through my head. Where the heck do I measure this thing? Is this right? Is this right? Is this right? Which size of device do I tackle, and how do I go ahead against it? So this was the first case, or no, it wasn't the first case, it was a case we did with Amulet. So I figured that what I would try and do is I would try and catch myself into this area. Let me just see if I can go back one. Into this area of neck just here, and place the device here, and that's what I would have done with an ACP. So here I am with an Amulet, and I think, okay, so we'll try and do the same thing. It's a new system, it's got easier loading, it's supposed to have less air bubbles. So I start off, and this is what I see. So the first thing I want to tell you is it's always another tip that's helpful is, in spite of the fact that it's easier and it's supposed to be less problematic and it's supposed to be, in fact, without bubbles, it still can have bubbles, and so you need to maintain your level of vigilance. The other thing is that it's worthwhile including a little bit of contrast in with the device as you advance it, so you won't miss that appearance. So that's another helpful step. Now, at this point, I've deployed my device. I've got a 45 catheter, and it's clearly looking in the wrong direction. There is a possibility with a severe chicken wing of taking the sheath all the way round and trying and swinging it up. I felt that this bringing the sheath all the way back here would be extremely, applying an extreme amount of tension and potentially cause perforation. So I elected to try and reorient once I was already balled. And so here I am, and I'm actually putting my ball out. Now that I'm unsheathing, as I described before, first step, unsheath. Now, as you can see, if you remember, my neck is here, my body is here, and I'm certainly in the wrong direction, and I've no longer got a ball because it's an amulet, and so now what I've actually got is a mushroom. So we're in a chicken wing sandwich with mushrooms at this point, and we can see here that it's sitting completely in the wrong orientation. So what am I supposed to do at this point? I'm going to put extreme counterclockwise rotation. So I'm putting a lot of counterclockwise rotation, and I want it to go to the neck, but as I deploy the device, it bounces into the body. So I try again. And once again, I've sat in the body. You can clearly see that I'm not oriented correctly, and this isn't going to do anything wonderful for me. I try another time, and I ended up with the same result. So I figured at this point, let's see if I can get the disc out. I actually tried one more time, I'm sorry, to reorient with a very slow deployment. So what here is going on is I'm doing a very, very slow deployment, but because the amulet, and this is something the reader said, the amulet requires a lot of volume in order to deploy it. For its final smaller position within the appendage, you need much more room, and here it's not what I had. So as I tried to deploy it, it got itself kicked out. So I tried again, and clearly it's pointing in the wrong direction, so I couldn't cope with that. So I tried another time and positioned it there. Finally, I said, okay, let's try put the disc out. So we put the disc out, and I've got this big leak here. So I said, okay, now this is the amulet. This is the excellent new cable. So let's see what happens. And here it was very helpful because it allowed me to see what the position of the disc in the final position is going to be. And clearly it's not adequate. It's still open here. So therefore, I was unhappy, and I actually changed and upsized the device. So at this point, I had enough trouble beforehand, and as you can see now, I'm actually dealing with an even bigger device that's coming out in a longer fashion. I still don't have that room. Extreme counterclockwise rotation to try and achieve that position, and look what happens. It turns my catheter. It's twisting my catheter as I'm trying to release it or trying to advance it. Now I'm pushing it out, and it'll tip as it tries to achieve its position. It's looking for the room, and it just doesn't have that room. Once again, catheter's changing its position as it gets into, as the device emerges, as the lobe emerges. I even chickened out at some point, speaking about chickens. So I've gone on, and once again it'll fall out. And so here I stopped and I said, okay, how am I going to do this? Am I going to take a regular ACP? Am I going to try something different? So what I did at this point, I deployed the lobe here, and then I took a lot of tension on the device. And as I emerged, I maintained a lot of tension here, and look what's happening to the catheter. I kept pushing this device across here to try and maintain the lobe so it would open in the chicken wing and make my sandwich. Look at that tension. With a very, very slow deployment. Look at that. And as soon as it comes out, I was able to achieve that position. Having achieved that position, had a quick look with some contrast, and then I did my deployment of my disc. Seemed to be much better, wasn't open. Then I had a look around to see what it was looking like in the LAA view that I saw that had no ostium in the past. Had a good look to make sure. I was very uncomfortable with the way it was sitting and where it looked like. until finally you can see here the release. I actually released without advancing the cable, which was fine, and then a final injection which showed a good result, and checking it once again in a final view. So I'm going to summarize and finish 18 seconds over time by saying that sheath and groin management are important to avoid complications. Septal management, visibility is important. You need to puncture properly, both in sight and safety. The passage is important. You need to be careful with your needle. You need to watch it on your transeptal system and watch it on your delivery system. The sizing is very important so that you choose the correct device, whether it be an ACP or an Amulet. They are not the same, and you need to take that into account. The device preparation is another issue that you need to avoid any problems and complications of. In terms of device deployment, the ACP, sheath position, you should use the 1, 2, 3, 4 technique, the 4 signs, the 4 steps of deployment. And then with its Amulet, you need to decide what the device wants, and you need to decide what you want and try and get them to match. And then the retention system, you use 5 signs, confirm them both by echo and angio, and then sign number 6 as my latest advance to you today. My final comment is that all of this can only be done with a great team, and I want to give special thanks to my partner in crime, Dr. Adibutanaro, who's our echo specialist who works with me in structural heart. Thank you very much.